Hey everyone, welcome. I think we can wait for 4 or 5 more minutes so that everyone can join us, and then we can start. But yeah, welcome everyone. Okay, I think we can start. Dr. Stephen, are you there?
I'm here. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, nice to meet you. I'm Clara.
Hi, Clara.
Well, yeah, are you ready to start? Can we go?
Yeah, happy to get going. First of all, good to see everybody, and also everybody who's joining us on YouTube. And thanks for the invite to chat with you guys. It's actually a real honor to be asked to do these kind of things. It's just fun to know that the research we do and that it makes an impact and that people notice. So I'm really happy to have the chance to speak to you guys, as students who are really in the early stages of your lives in education and in science and with such boundless possibilities. So, what I'm going to talk a little bit today about the work that I do. And then what I want to do is just leave a lot of time for questions more than anything. So I'm going to put some slides up in a minute, slides about dinosaurs because I study dinosaurs. And I'll go through a little presentation, but I won't keep it too formal. I'll keep it a little bit chatty, a little bit conversational. And then please do think of any questions you might want to ask. Very happy to talk and discuss anything you might want to know about dinosaurs, about paleontology, about fossils, but also about my career and my studies and really anything you might want to know about the life of a scientist. So I'm going to put these slides up here. So I'm going to share my screen. You should be seeing this. Okay. So what I want to talk about today is the really cool stuff that I study, which is dinosaurs. I'm one of those lucky people that gets to dig up dinosaurs for my job. So I'm a paleontologist, and I study not only dinosaurs. I really study lots of different types of fossils, the records of the plants and animals that used to live on the Earth. And the Earth is a very, very old planet. I mean, the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. And there have been so many interesting types of plants and animals that have lived throughout Earth history. But for me, the most fascinating are the dinosaurs. And I'm very fortunate because I get to study dinosaurs here in Edinburgh. So I'm joining you from my office at the University of Edinburgh up here in Scotland. And this is a wonderful university. It's a very old university that goes back to the 1500s. It was here where the entire science of geology, the science of Earth history, really started. And there have been so many great paleontologists that have worked here over the years. So I feel very privileged to be part of this community here. A few years back, I wrote a book about dinosaurs called The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs. It's a pop science book. And I tried to write it in a very broad, very accessible way. And what I wanted to do in this book was to tell the story of dinosaur evolution. So where dinosaurs came from, how they became so dominant, how they became so big, and then how they went extinct. And in telling that story, I wanted to weave in some of my own stories of digging up dinosaurs, traveling around the world, working with so many interesting people in so many interesting places. And so in the time we have today, I want to just give you a little bit of that story. I want to give you that general story of the dinosaurs and give you a few snapshots of some of the fossils that I've discovered and that I've studied and some of the people that I've worked with. And so rather than just linger on small talk, I'm going to jump into the story because dinosaurs lived a long time ago and they lived for a long time. They lived for well over 150 million years. And I want to cover this story in 30, 40 minutes or so. So let's just dive right into it. And let's go all the way back in time to when the Earth looked like this. This was about 250 million years ago. And this was the time when all of the land was gathered together, smashed up together into this one supercontinent called Pangaea, which stretched from the North Pole all the way down to the South Pole. And this was a very challenging place to live. There were big deserts that covered much of that supercontinent. It was hot, it was dry. But there were some animals and plants that were very well adapted to that world, including many early cousins and ancestors of ours, very early relatives of mammals. But then, about 250 million years ago, these huge volcanoes started to erupt in what is now Siberia in Russia. And these were not normal volcanoes. These were not the types of volcanoes that we're used to seeing in today's world. These were mega volcanoes. They were huge canyons in the earth that opened up and just spilled out lava for hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of years. And all of that lava covered an area of land that was like twice the size of modern day Europe. So a huge amount of lava, but the lava wasn't even the biggest problem. The biggest problem was all the carbon dioxide and the methane and the nasty greenhouse gases that came up from the deep earth with the lava. Those went into the atmosphere, they caused global warming, and that warming happened so quickly and was so severe that it led to a mass extinction where a lot of species died out all over the world at the same time. And maybe even up to 95% of all species died because of that global warming. But some species did survive. And when I was a student, I was infatuated. I became so obsessed with this extinction. I wanted to know what lived and what died and how quickly the earth recovered. And so I started to do some field work. I started to work with colleagues in different parts of the world. And one place where I did a lot of work was in Poland. And I worked with Gregors, who grew up in central Poland. And he grew up as a teenager. He started to collect fossils in these rocks, these red rocks, layer after layer of these rocks. And these rocks span that extinction. They span the global warming and then what came afterwards. And the rocks that came afterwards are rocks from the Triassic period. So the extinction happened at the end of the Permian period. That was a time of Earth history. And then the Triassic period came next. And so you can follow those rocks and the fossils in those rocks. You can read them like the pages in a book that tell the story of what lived and what died and how the recovery happened. Now, the fossils that we find in these Polish rocks usually are not skeletons. They're not the beautiful fossils you might see on display in a museum, but they're fossils that look like these. And these are what we call trace fossils. These are handprints and footprints. They are the traces, the marks that animals left behind. And right here, you can see there's one handprint and one footprint. This is part of the trackway of an animal walking. And those little prints are just a few centimeters long, just about the size of a cat's paw print. And they would have been made by an animal that looks something like this, just about the size of a house cat, with really long, skinny arms and legs, a really slender body. This was a reptile, and it was a reptile that moved really fast. But it was not a very common reptile. Only about 5% of the footprints and handprints we find were made by this reptile. But even though this animal was small, even though this animal was rare, it was very important. It was living about 250 million years ago, within 1 million years of that terrible extinction caused by the global warming. It was part of the recovery from that extinction. And this animal is the ancestor of dinosaurs. It might not look like a T-Rex, it might not look like a Brontosaurus, but from small things, great things often come. And that was the case with dinosaurs. They came from these little reptiles that survived the extinction and started to proliferate afterwards. And these early dinosaurs continued to evolve for the next 50 million years of the Triassic period, but they were not dominant animals. They were not big animals, at least not yet. And we see signs of what the dominant animals were with other fieldwork that we've done in Portugal, in the Algarve in southern Portugal. And there are also rocks from the Triassic age in this part of Portugal, and these rocks are full of fossils. And at this place where we're digging into the hillside, we found a graveyard. We found dozens of skeletons. And in fact, there's probably hundreds more that are extending into the cliffs that we just haven't taken out yet. But these skeletons are not dinosaurs. These skeletons are the skeletons of these animals, salamanders the size of cars. And it was these giant super salamanders that ruled the lakes and the rivers back in the Triassic period. If you were one of these small, primitive, humble little early dinosaurs, you would have stayed as far from the water as you could because these monsters were there lurking for you. But dry land was no safer. Dry land was the domain of the crocodiles. And back in the Triassic, there was a huge diversity of crocodiles, so much more diverse than the crocodiles and alligators today. There were crocodiles that were 10 meters long, that were the top predators. There were crocs that had spikes and armor all over their bodies. There were some crocs that ate plants. There were other crocs that had no teeth at all, and they had beaks. There were some crocs that walked only on their hind legs. There was this great richness of the crocodile side of the family tree, and these were the animals that dominated the land. They were the star actors. The dinosaurs were the role players. They were the supporting actors for the entire Triassic period. Until something happened, something changed. And about 200 million years ago, a good 50 million years after those first little dinosaur ancestors were making their footprints in Poland, that supercontinent of Pangaea, it finally started to break apart. And of course it did. This is why we have separate continents today. This is why we have North America and Europe. This is why we have Africa and South America. Nowadays, the cracks in Pangaea are the shorelines of the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean has filled the space between the new continents. But before the water moved in, back at the end of the Triassic period, first, the Earth bled lava. And it was another time of mega volcanoes. For 600,000 years, lava spewed out of these volcanoes, and that led to more global warming. It led to another extinction. And that extinction closed out the Triassic period, and it ushered in the next interval of time, which is what we call the Jurassic period. This extinction, it really hurt the crocs and those giant salamanders. They did not completely go extinct, but they almost did. All of that great diversity of crocs, it was nearly all wiped out. There were only a few surviving species, which were the ancestors of today's crocodiles and alligators. Dinosaurs, though, they barely felt the extinction. They were the great survivors. And I wish I had a good explanation for it. I really do. It would make the story so much cleaner. But the fact is, this is still a mystery. Why the dinosaurs survived when their croc and their salamander competitors were mostly wiped out. There are lots of ideas. Maybe dinosaurs grew faster. Maybe they could run faster. Maybe they had feathers that kept them warm. We don't know the answer, though. And I really do think this is the single biggest mystery about dinosaurs that we don't understand. And I do think it'll be something that somebody in the next generation of paleontologists will figure out. So some keen young person with bright new ideas is going to solve this mystery. But for the moment, what we do know is that this extinction did happen. The crocs and salamanders were the big victims. The dinosaurs were the big survivors. And then after that extinction, in the Jurassic period, is when dinosaurs really prospered. This is when dinosaurs spread all around the world. This is when dinosaurs started to grow into huge sizes, meat eaters the size of buses, long-necked plant eaters that eventually got bigger than Boeing 737 airplanes. And then all sorts of dinosaurs with fantastic horns and spikes and plates and crests and duckbills and dome heads and all of these wonderful things that make dinosaurs so iconic, so charismatic. It was only in the Jurassic period that dinosaurs really became the dominant animals on land. And that is why it's called Jurassic Park, by the way. If it was Triassic Park, it would be a book, it would be a film about crocodiles, which would be very cool, but it would not be about dinosaurs because it's only in the Jurassic period that dinosaurs are really becoming dominant. Now, we know of about 1,500 species of dinosaurs that have been discovered from fossils, but we keep finding new ones. And right now, we are in the middle of the most exciting phase in the history of paleontology. People are finding more dinosaurs than ever before. Somebody somewhere around the world is finding a new species of dinosaur once every single week on average, which is a crazy number, but it's true. That means every year we learn of about 50 totally new types of dinosaurs we never knew about before. And why is this? Well, it's simple. There's more people looking for dinosaurs than ever before. Paleontology, like many sciences, used to be something that, let's face it, only a handful of people in the posh universities in Europe and North America, places like the University of Edinburgh, a science was only practiced by those kind of people. But now the science has expanded, it's diversified. There are so many young people all over the world, especially in places like China and Argentina and Brazil and South Africa and Mongolia, that are going out, finding their own dinosaurs, becoming paleontologists. And we really are finding dinosaurs all over the world now, even right here in Scotland. Now, Scotland might not seem like the type of place where you would find dinosaurs. If you've ever seen a show on TV about dinosaurs, you've probably seen paleontologists going out into the desert where it's hot and it's dry and they're brushing sand off the bones and some skeleton comes into view. And usually it's some guy that looks like Indiana Jones that's doing that. It's a real stereotype. That's not the reality of paleontology. The reality is we can find fossils of dinosaurs anywhere where there's rocks from the Triassic, Jurassic, or Cretaceous period. And those rocks were formed on land in the kind of environments dinosaurs lived in. And we just so happen to have those types of rocks in one place in Scotland, and that is this beautiful island off the west coast called the Isle of Skye, which I think is one of the most amazing places in the entire world. There's these stunning landscapes, these tall mountains, cliffs, moors, and you have all along the shoreline rocks of the Jurassic age, rocks that were made about 170 million years ago. Now, every year I bring my students to the Isle of Skye, and my students always find the best fossils. I wish I could say I find the best fossils, but I don't. It's my students. And this is the single best example. This is Amelia in the middle there, who studied here a few years ago. And there she is pointing out to Paige and to Shasta on two sides of her, this incredible fossil that she found. And this is the head, the skull of a pterodactyl. And it's connected to a neck that's connected to a body. And we have a nearly complete skeleton of this flying reptile found by Amelia, who was a student at the time. Now, I'd say more about it, except we're studying it right now. It's in my lab just across the hall, and we're in fact just writing up the scientific paper describing it. We're going to give it a name. It's a new species of pterosaur. And that paper just came back from what's called peer review, where it's been sent out to some other paleontologists, and they give comments and they give some suggestions. And so we're working on revising the paper now, and hopefully that will come out probably early next year. And so keep your eyes tuned for this. Maybe this will make the news, the discovery of a new Scottish pterodactyl. But pterodactyls were not dinosaurs. They were reptiles that flew, but they were cousins of dinosaurs, not true dinosaurs. So I won't say anything more about it, but instead, I'll just talk a little bit more about the work we do on Sky. So we collect a lot of fossils, and the students, again, collect the best fossils. And this is Moji. Moji is from Nigeria, and she came here to study with us. We have a one-year master's course in paleontology here in Edinburgh that I lead. And so Moji came to study here, and she studied fish. We find fish fossils in the same rocks as some of the dinosaur fossils. And Moji is using this angle grinder to cut the little fish bones out of the rock because the rock is very hard. When it comes to dinosaurs, though, we need bigger tools. And here's Doogie Ross, who's a native of Skye, who built his own museum on the island to put the dinosaur bones that he finds into this museum. And Doogie's job, his day job, he's a builder. So he has a lot of his own rock saws tipped with diamonds that he can use to cut these dinosaur bones out of the rock. And here's a dinosaur bone right down here. Now, I could say a lot about the Isle of Skye. I love Skye, but I just want to tell one story about what I think, at least until Amelia found that pterodactyl, what I think was our most important discovery. And we made this discovery a few years ago on the far northern tip of the island at this beach. And I'm taking this picture. I'm standing in the shadows of the ruins of a 14th century castle, taking this photograph. And look, the sky is blue. It's not raining. This is a rare thing for the Scottish Islands. So you might think, why am I taking this photo? Why am I not looking for fossils? Well, you can see that the waves are lapping up against the beach. It's high tide. So we can't look for fossils at high tide. But as the tide goes down, that beach turns into a rock platform. And that rock is Jurassic Age rock. And we went there to look for fossils of bones. We didn't really find any bones. It was a really disappointing day. We spent 5-6 hours looking for bones, and we found nothing. And that's actually pretty common. It's not that every time we go out, we just find new dinosaurs everywhere. I mean, it's very hard to find a new dinosaur. So it's really common to have disappointing days, to not find any fossils for a while. And this day was shaping up to be one of those days. And then we started to walk back to our cars later in the afternoon. We were tired of failing, basically, and find any fossils. But as we were walking back, we noticed there were these big tide pools in the rock. They were full of seaweed and barnacles and limpets and hermit crabs and so on. And they were big. Each one was about the size of a car tire. But then we noticed there was a pattern to these things. There was, first of all, over 100 of them, so they were very common. And then there was this pattern. There was a bit of a left-right zigzagging sequence. And we could see from the sides that these things were actually impressed into the rock. So they must have formed back before this rock was even rock, back when it was just soft sand, by something impressing into that sand. And then we could see some of them had bits sticking out from one end, 1, 2, 3, 4. Others were paired together. There was a big horseshoe-shaped one with a smaller crescent-shaped one in front. And they were very big. Again, bigger than car tires. So after a few minutes, it dawned on us that, wait a minute, this is actually a good day. We had found fossils, just not bones or skeletons. But these were fossil footprints and handprints, but huge ones, so much bigger than those ones in Poland, because we're now in the Jurassic period and dinosaurs are much bigger. And there's really only one type of dinosaur, one type of animal of any time that's ever lived on the land in the entire history of the earth that was so big that every time its hand or foot hit the ground, it left a hole the size of a car tire. And that's these giant long-necked dinosaurs, what we call the sauropod dinosaurs. These are the types of dinosaurs that include things like Brontosaurus and Diplodocus. The one that was making its handprints and footprints on the Isle of Skye 170 million years ago was about the size of 3 elephants put together. And when it was leaving those footprints, it was the largest animal that had ever lived on the earth. up until that point in time. Now, later on, some of these sauropods would become heavier than Boeing 737 airplanes, heavier than one of those EasyJet or Ryanair planes that you might know, which is remarkable. The biggest animals to ever live on land. Now, my student Paige, who you saw a few photos ago, Paige comes from the US like me, but she's moved to Scotland. And Paige has a background in geology, so she studies rocks and studies the earth, but also a background in engineering. So she's very good at building machines and running experiments. And so Paige has been using drones to map the track sites of Skye. And we actually have many track sites. There's that new one we found a few years ago, but we keep finding new ones. And Paige's studies have shown that we have more than just tracks of long-necked dinosaurs. We have tracks made by meat eaters, early cousins of T-Rex. We have tracks made by stegosaurs with plates on their backs. We have tracks made by duck-billed dinosaurs that use their beaks to chew plants. And we can tell that a lot of these animals were actually moving around, walking on the beaches, even wading in the shallow waters of these lagoons 170 million years ago. Now, this artwork, this was done by a guy named John Hode, who lives up in Perth here in Scotland. And John has created this scene where there's just been a storm, the weather is getting calmer, and some of these big long-necked dinosaurs are going out into the lagoon to search for food. But in the foreground, there's a different type of dinosaur, much smaller, just about the size of a human, and it only walks on its hind legs. This dinosaur is an early tyrannosaur. It is one of the ancestors of T-Rex. Now, we only have footprints in Scotland, but in places like China, there are skeletons of these animals, and this is one called Guanlong. This is our best look at what an early tyrannosaur would have looked like. And it's not a very impressive animal. It's no bigger than you and me. It would not have been a top predator. It was not at the top of the food chain. It was maybe 2 or 3 rungs down in the food chain. But this is the type of animal T-Rex would evolve from 100 million years later. So how did that happen? How did tyrannosaurs get bigger? How did they become the top predators? Well, we have a new clue from a new discovery that was made a couple of years ago in Uzbekistan. That's a big country in Central Asia. This is another example of how people are finding dinosaurs all over the world now. Timurlengia is important. And Timurlengia, by the way, is the name we gave to this new species of tyrannosaur. Timurlengia is really important because it fills a gap. The first tyrannosaurs, like Guanlong and the ones making their footprints on Skye, they lived about 170 million years ago, and they were only the size of humans. The last tyrannosaurs, like T-Rex, lived 66 million years ago and were the size of buses. Timurlengia falls in between in age and also in size. Timurlengia was about the size of a horse. Now, what we see here on the left is the head of Timurlengia, and we're looking at it from behind. So this hole is where the spinal cord would go into the brain. So we can put this skull into a CAT scanner, just like a medical doctor does to see inside of our bodies if there's a problem. But we can use the x-rays of the CAT scanner to see inside this dinosaur's head, and then we can use software to build digital 3D models of the brain, the ears, the blood vessels, the sinuses, really anything that's inside that head. And that allows us to see what this dinosaur's brain looked like. And what you see here in blue is the back end of the brain of this tyrannosaur. And what you see here in pink that looks like a pretzel, that is the ear. Now, what's important here is that that brain is really big for a horse-sized reptile. So this was a smart dinosaur. And this ear, this bit that sticks down from the pretzel, that's called the cochlea. That's the bit of the ear that hears sound. We have one in our ears. And we know from modern day animals, the longer the cochlea, the more range of sounds that animal can hear. This is a very long cochlea. So what that means is that these tyrannosaurs, while they were still pretty small, just the size of horses, they were getting bigger brains. They were developing higher intelligence. They were developing sharper senses, probably as a way to survive in a world where there were other giant dinosaurs. But then some of those other giant dinosaurs died out. in what's called the Cretaceous period, the time after the Jurassic period. But the tyrannosaurs did not. Now, we don't know why those other dinosaurs died. That's another big mystery, but it seems like there were some big climate and environmental changes. But tyrannosaurs were able to survive those, and then tyrannosaurs took over. They moved into their new job as the top predators. And that's what culminated in things like T-Rex, the size of a bus, a head the size of a bathtub. I could fit inside its jaws. It had more than 50 teeth in its mouth. Each one was the size and shape of a banana. This was an amazing animal, and it is, I have to say, my very favorite dinosaur. And what makes T-Rex so amazing is not only that it's really big and really powerful, but also it was really smart because it inherited those big brains and keen senses from its smaller ancestors. So T-Rex was the ultimate predator because it had both brawn and brains. Now, over time, tyrannosaurs got bigger, but there was another group of meat-eating dinosaurs that did the opposite. They got smaller over time, and these were the raptor dinosaurs. And what you see here is the real velociraptor. Now, I know we have an image of velociraptor from Jurassic Park, but that image is incorrect. Now, I'm not too critical of Jurassic Park. I love the films. I think they're the most important thing to happen to paleontology in a long time. They led to so much new interest in dinosaurs, and they motivated many people to become paleontologists. And now I'm the science consultant for the Jurassic World series. So I love the films. But one thing I will say is those velociraptors are not very accurate, and that's a shame. The real velociraptor looked like this. It was only about the size of a miniature poodle. And it was not green. It was not covered in scales. It did not look like an overgrown lizard. Instead, the real velociraptor had feathers, and it even had wings on its arms. And this is not a guess. This artwork is done by a guy named Todd Marshall, who's one of the great paleo artists in the world today. But this is not some crazy idea that Todd is just making up. No, we know this from actual fossils, from the most important dinosaur fossils that have been found in my lifetime. And these fossils come from northeastern China, a place called Liaoning province. This is not on the tourist trail in China. It is way tucked away. It shares a long border with North Korea. It's a land of factories, a land of hills, a land of a lot of farming. And it was in the mid-1990s, a few years after Jurassic Park came out, that farmers started to find fossils like these. These gorgeous skeletons of dinosaurs. All the bones are there, but also some of the soft bits too, including feathers all over the bodies. And this is really in many ways miraculous because it's very hard to turn soft things like feathers or skin or muscles into fossils. But these dinosaurs just happened to live in the Cretaceous period in an area where there were lots of volcanoes, and sometimes these volcanoes would erupt and the ash would bury entire ecosystems. And very sadly for the dinosaurs, it would kill those dinosaurs, but it would bury them so quickly that it would capture those soft tissues like the feathers. Now, these feathered dinosaurs from China, they tell us so many things. The first thing they tell us is that birds evolved from dinosaurs. Today's birds have feathers. Only birds have feathers. Mammals like us don't have feathers. Lizards, snakes, crocodiles don't have feathers. Feathers are a bird thing, but feathers were there in dinosaurs first. And this is the best evidence we have that today's birds came from the dinosaurs. Secondly, these feathered dinosaurs tell us about how feathers evolved and how flying evolved. The first thing that we see is that so many species of these dinosaurs in China are covered in feathers. We have meat eaters and plant eaters with feathers on their bodies. We have small dinosaurs no bigger than pigeons. We have a tyrannosaur from China that is 9 meters long and weighed 1 ton and has feathers all over its body. So feathers probably go back to the common ancestor of dinosaurs. Probably all dinosaurs had some type of feather on their body the same way that mammals, like us, all mammals have some type of hair. Some mammals have a lot of hair. Think of a dog or a cat. Other mammals have just a little bit of hair, like an elephant. They're so big, they don't need a lot of hair. But all mammals have some type of hair, and the same is probably true of dinosaurs. All dinosaurs probably had some type of feather. Now, most dinosaurs, though, had simple feathers, feathers like these. This was part of the tail of a tyrannosaur. And these feathers, these things that look like really like scratches in the rock, they're just individual little feathers, individual little strands, little ribbons. And that's what most dinosaurs had. Now, these dinosaurs could not fly with these feathers any more than we can fly with our little ribbons of hair. So feathers must have evolved for another reason. And probably feathers evolved for the same reason hair evolved in mammals, and that is to help keep these dinosaurs warm. But then, one group of dinosaurs started to do some funny things with its feathers. And these were the raptor dinosaurs. And as their bodies got smaller and smaller over time, the raptors started to pack feathers ever more tightly all over their bodies. And they started to line up some of those feathers on their arms. And those feathers got longer. And they started to branch out. They weren't just single ribbons anymore, but they started to branch out like brushes. And then they got flat, to the point where you had these dinosaurs evolving wings of quill pen feathers all along their arms. This is an example of a fossil wing, but this is not a bird, it's a raptor dinosaur. But look at those feathers all along the arm. This is basically identical to the wing of a bird. Now this wing is on this dinosaur. It's a new species of dinosaur that I described a few years ago with my friend, the great Chinese paleontologist Junchang Liu. And this dinosaur is about the size of a big dog, something like a Saint Bernard. And it is a gorgeous fossil. Just look at all the beautiful bones, but also feathers all along the tail, all over the body. There's that wing. There's the other wing. This new dinosaur, we called it Zhenwanlong. And this is what it would have looked like, more or less, when it was alive. I think if you saw this alive, first of all, it would be frightening. Look at those big claws on those feet. You would want to stay away from this animal, but I do think you wouldn't think it any weirder than just some strange bird. I mean, no stranger than a turkey or an ostrich or an emu or something like that. But it wasn't a bird. It was a dinosaur, and at that, a raptor dinosaur. And what we mean by that simply is we call birds those dinosaurs that have feathers forming wings, and that those wings are big enough that when they flap, those wings can move around those dinosaurs in the air. In other words, birds are flying dinosaurs. Zhenwanlong was too big of an animal, and its wings were too small for it to be able to fly. But you could imagine how evolution could take an animal like this, make its body a little bit smaller, make those wings a little bit bigger, and create something that could fly. So you might be asking, why did wings evolve then? Wings must not have evolved for flying. And no, they probably didn't. Because the first fossils we have of raptor dinosaurs with wings, these dinosaurs couldn't fly. So we think those wings were probably for display, to attract mates, to intimidate rivals. So many animals do things for display. So many birds use their feathers for display. Just think about the tail of a peacock. It's not flying with that tail, it's using it for display. So, wings probably first evolved as advertising billboards sticking out of the arms of these animals. And then as these dinosaurs got small enough and those wings got bigger, that all of a sudden when these dinosaurs started moving their wings, their billboards, just by the simple laws of physics, those wings would have provided a little bit of lift, a little bit of thrust. That dinosaur could move around in the air. And it was then that we say that birds were born. Dinosaurs had evolved into birds. Now, it's a funny thing to think about, I know, because that means that birds are dinosaurs. They are part of the dinosaur family tree. They evolved from other dinosaurs. They are as much dinosaurs as a T-Rex is or a Brontosaurus is. And that is weird to think about. But I think the best way to think about this is to think about bats. What is a bat? A bat is a mammal. Of course a bat is a mammal. It has hair. It feeds its baby's milk. It does all the things mammals do. But a bat is just a weird type of mammal that got small, evolved wings, and developed the ability to fly. And birds are the dinosaur equivalent of that. They're just a strange type of dinosaur that got small, evolved wings, and developed the ability to fly. And that means that dinosaurs are still alive in the form of over 10,000 species of birds, some of which are beautiful and majestic, others are not so much. But if you're ever on the beach or walking along the river and one of these gulls comes down and tries to dive bomb you and steal your chips and eat your ice cream, as annoying and as frightening as that can be, I think in that moment you can see in the cunningness, the nastiness, the intelligence, you can sense the inner velociraptor in a seagull. So dinosaurs live on in the form of birds, but all other dinosaurs, the T-Rexes, the Brontosauruses, all those dinosaurs, they are gone. And they died out 66 million years ago at the end of the Cretaceous period. This was the time after the Jurassic period. And by this time, the continents had continued to move around. And by this time, the Earth looked like this. You can see the Earth is starting to look more modern. And it was in this world that T-Rex itself lived. T-Rex lived only in Western North America, only on this sliver of land. And that's where Triceratops lived and a lot of other famous dinosaurs. And those dinosaurs would have been there on the day that this 6-mile wide asteroid that was traveling faster than a speeding bullet fell out of the sky, smashed into the Earth with the force of over 1 billion nuclear bombs put together. It punched a hole in the crust over 100 miles wide. That's a crater we can now see in Mexico. And this unleashed earthquakes and wildfires and tidal waves and all kinds of disasters. The dinosaurs had to deal with these things, and they did not cope well. And all of them, except for birds, died out, probably within about 20,000 years at most. A very short amount of time compared to the entire history of the Earth and the entire 150 million years dinosaurs had ruled the world. Now, I love dinosaurs. I'll continue to study dinosaurs. I have students here working on dinosaurs, lots of interesting projects we do. But the more I study the extinction of dinosaurs, the more it makes me wonder about what happened when the asteroid hit. What lived? What died? Why was that? And how did the Earth recover? And so I've started to do a lot of field work in New Mexico, in the western part of the United States. New Mexico is one of the best places in the world for studying this question because we have fossils of the very last dinosaurs in New Mexico. Then we have the extinction represented in the rocks. Then we have fossils of the animals that replaced the dinosaurs. And I bring my students to New Mexico. We have a big group of students here working on this project. This is Sarah, who was my very first PhD student, and Sarah now is one of the world experts in the animals that took over from the dinosaurs. And we find thousands of their fossils in New Mexico, littering the ground in some places. And these fossils often look like this. And these things might look familiar to you because all of us, or at least most of us, have these same very things in our mouths. These are teeth, and these are not the steak knife teeth of a T-Rex. These are the characteristic premolars and molars of mammals. So it was mammals that took over from the dinosaurs. And in New Mexico, not too long after the extinction, we see fossils of this mammal called Torohonia. It's just about the size of a house cat. It had long, skinny arms and legs, but it had fingers and toes that could grip onto the branches. It moved around in the trees. This was a primate, one of the very first primates, an ancestor of ours. And it only got its opportunity because that asteroid killed off the dinosaurs. So if that asteroid never hit, if that asteroid was a near miss and it just kept hurtling through space right by the Earth, the dinosaurs would probably still be here today as much more than just birds. Mammals would have never gotten their opportunity, and we probably would not be here having this conversation. So, on that wild note, I'll end my slides here, and very happy to take any questions that anybody has in the 10 minutes or so that we have left. So thank you very, very much, and thanks again for the invitation. And OM and Clara, thanks for making this happen.
Thank you very much for your lecture. I personally enjoyed very, very much. I had a few questions here in the chat. So, but also if anyone wants to talk, I just ask you all to raise your hands and I'll just start talking. Otherwise, it gets a bit confusing.
Good.
But I think I can read the questions in the chat. Is that okay?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, let me get this. Okay, first of all, how did dinosaurs grow so big if their ancestors were relatively small?
So, oh, that's a very good question. So the ones that were the size of planes, I mean, it's crazy to think about an animal that big, right? I mean, this animal had to actually live. It had to grow up. It had to move around. It had to eat. So it's a real feat of nature to make something that big. There's probably not one single reason these dinosaurs were able to get so big, but it was probably a few things that combined together that allowed them to get so big. One is that they had really long necks, so they could reach way high up into the trees. And they had basically a never-ending source of food. You know, they could eat leaves all day that no other dinosaurs could reach, so they could just keep eating and eating. The second thing is they had very efficient lungs. They had lungs that could take in a lot more oxygen than, say, our mammal lungs. They had lungs that were very similar to the lungs of birds. And bird lungs are just very efficient because birds, when they breathe in, they breathe oxygen, but they also can store air in air sacs, which are these balloons that connect to the lung. And when those balloons deflate, that air then passes over the lung, and it gives basically a second burst of oxygen. We know dinosaurs, like the big long-necked dinosaurs, had those lungs because those air sacs, they leave marks on the bones. They go into the bones and they leave marks on the bones and hollow out the bones. And we see those same marks that we see on birds, we see those same marks on dinosaur fossils. So being able to take in extra oxygen was probably another reason why they could get so big. And then there were probably other things too. So it was all these things combined together that allowed some dinosaurs to become truly huge. And that's probably why mammals, other than whales, which live in the water, cannot become that big.
Yeah, good explanation. I don't know how to explain this. Let's see the other questions. Okay, how do you actually estimate locations where you can possibly get fossils? Is there a particular method to make these estimations?
Well, we do not have any fancy technology for finding fossils. We don't have any radar or sonar or anything that we can shoot into the rocks and see if there's a fossil inside. Instead, we have to do it the old-fashioned way. We have to go out and we have to walk around and we have to look and we have to see if there's anything sticking out of the rocks that looks like a fossil. And if so, we stop and we look closer and we dig more into the rocks and we hope that it connects to a skeleton. It's very old-fashioned, but there's no other way to do it. Which means that we have to choose our locations carefully. We can't just start digging holes in our back garden and hope to find a dinosaur. Instead, we want to target places where there are rocks, because fossils are always found in rocks, and those rocks have to be the right age and the right type to have dinosaur bones. So they have to have been formed in the Triassic, Jurassic, or Cretaceous periods, and they have to have been formed on land, along rivers, along lakes, on the beaches, in lagoons, and the kind of places dinosaurs would live. And so that means we spend a lot of our time looking at maps and looking at maps of the rocks. A lot of the rocks of the world have been mapped because people want to know where to find coal and diamonds and oil and all those kind of things. So that means we know a lot about what rocks are where. So we do our homework. We try to find places that might have dinosaur fossils, and then we go out and we start looking. And it's really no more sophisticated than that.
Okay. Another one. How is it at all practical to have arms that can reach anything? For example, the T-Rex.
It's funny, isn't it? T-Rex's arms were the size of like my arms, which is nuts because T-Rex was the size of a bus. So imagine a double-decker bus, a London bus with like human arms sticking out. It's crazy. It's like it makes no sense. So really, more than anything, it means the arms were not doing very much. T-Rex had a huge head And over the evolution of tyrannosaurs, we can see the head gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the arms get smaller and smaller and smaller. So clearly the head is doing most of the work. It's grabbing the food, it's biting the food, it's chewing the food, all that stuff. But the arms are still there, and there are muscles on those arms. And the muscles that bring the arms closer to the body, that do this kind of motion, those muscles on T-Rex arms are actually really strong. They're stronger than our muscles. We can just tell from the size of the marks on the bones that the muscles left. So we think that T-Rex was using its arms to brace itself, to hold itself when it was eating. When it bit into something, it bit so hard it would crush bone. It could bite so strong that it crushed bone. So it would need to brace itself to make sure it didn't hurt itself. So we think that's what the arms were for.
There are two questions pretty similar. They ask about what's the most fascinating fossil you've ever found in your career? And also, what's the most important thing you've learned throughout your experiences?
Sorry, the first one was the most what fossil?
What was the most fascinating fossil?
Oh, most fascinating. I would say, I mean, my favorite really is that the footprints and handprints from the Isle of Skye in Scotland, because it was so unexpected to find these tracks of these enormous dinosaurs, here in Scotland. So that one was really fun and I think really fascinating. I think the most important things that I've learned is just, the Earth is very old, and the Earth has changed so much over time. And fossils tell us how the Earth has changed over time, how life has changed over time, how evolution happens, how real plants, real animals respond to real moments of climate and environmental change. And for me, that's what I think is the most important thing about fossils. And the more that I study, the more I just learn about how incredibly diverse life has been, excuse me, over time.
That's awesome. There's this one I really like. It's from Maria. She says, "It's so great to see young paleontologists from Brazil.
Yeah.
Could you indicate any study groups or something that relates to Brazil or South America?"
So I've been very lucky to visit Brazil once. I wish I could have visited more, but I did some field work in Brazil. I have some very good friends and colleagues there. There's a great paleontologist and good friend of mine named Roberto Candero who runs a lab in Goiás. And I've worked with him, and he studies lots of dinosaurs, but especially Cretaceous dinosaurs. And Brazil is one of the most exciting places right now for new dinosaur discovery. It's amazing. And there's a lot of new Triassic dinosaurs, so some of the oldest dinosaurs, the small ones, the primitive ones, and then there's a lot of Cretaceous dinosaurs, the ones that were living right at the end when the asteroid hit. And some of those are huge. There are some long-necked dinosaurs from Brazil, including a new one just described a few years ago that was like among the biggest that ever lived. And so really it's a matter, there's a lot of young people in Brazil that are studying paleontology now. It's a very popular science. That didn't used to be the case. There used to be only a handful of researchers. And Roberto's lab is great because he has a great diversity of students. He has a lot of young women that work with him. That was not traditionally the case either. And he has a lot of students just from different cultural, backgrounds in Brazil. And that's what's driving it. And so I just have a lot of fun. I was just chatting with Roberto and another one of his new students yesterday. And, this new student, she's starting a project on some of the meat-eating dinosaurs. So I'm going to help her out with a little bit. So, Brazil's just one of those places to keep your eye on. There's so many new discoveries and so many young people finding great stuff. And it's such a big country. It's just the potential is vast. So it's a great example of how it's not just the U.S. and Canada and the U.K. anymore. That's where all the dinosaurs are found. It's really all over the world, places like Brazil.
I'm personally very happy to hear you saying all those things because today we have lots of Brazilians here, including myself.
Right.
I think you can see everyone's smiling like, yeah.
Hey, that's awesome.
Brazil.
That's awesome. You should look up the work of Candero. There's another friend of mine named Max Langer who studies a lot of the Triassic dinosaurs. These guys find amazing stuff.
Oh, it makes me so happy to know that. Okay, I think this can be one of the last questions. Do you think the pop culture like Jurassic Park and Ross from Friends has helped interest in paleontology?
Yeah, definitely Jurassic Park. Ross from Friends, I won't say what I think of Ross. But Jurassic Park Jurassic Park was a good thing. It led to, I mean, how many hundreds of millions of people, billions of people maybe have seen, the films. Um, and that just led to people being interested in dinosaurs. It led to more museums putting on dinosaur exhibits. It led to more universities doing classes on dinosaurs. It led to more jobs for paleontologists. It just brought dinosaurs into the pop culture in such a wonderful way. So even though every dinosaur in the film is not perfect, it doesn't matter to me too much. The overall effect has been great. So I love it when dinosaurs are in pop culture. I think that's a great thing because dinosaurs are fascinating. Dinosaurs are not just for scientists, they're not just for the professors, they're not just for the universities. Everybody loves dinosaurs, and there's no better way to celebrate dinosaurs than in a blockbuster film with the most amazing special effects. And the next one will come out next summer, by the way, in June, the one that I worked on, Jurassic World Dominion. And it's going to be a good film. I can promise you that.
Spoilers. One of our participants, Laura, wanted to ask a question. So Laura, are you there?
Yes, I am. So hi. First, I would like to congratulate you. It is a pleasure being here today talking to you. And I've read an article talking about, your career as a researcher. And I would like to ask you a very specific question about the Jurassic World.
Mm-hmm.
You said that many colleagues of your generation would tell you point blank that Jurassic Park made them want to be a scientist, right?
Yep.
And then do you think that were you influenced to be a scientist by that movie?
Yeah, so it is true. A lot of paleontologists who are in their 30s and 40s would say Jurassic Park was a big reason they became a paleontologist. For me, it was not the reason. For me, it was because my youngest brother was really interested in dinosaurs, so I learned a lot about dinosaurs from him. But he became fascinated with Jurassic Park. So in a strange way, it did make me, fascinated with dinosaurs. But I do remember seeing Jurassic Park in the cinema. I was 9 years old when it came out in 1993. And it was amazing. Even though I didn't really care about dinosaurs at the time, I just remember being just wowed by the T-Rex and the the Brachiosaurus, and just how amazing, how real those dinosaurs look. So, yeah. So Jurassic Park, very important. Yep.
And because of that, how was the feeling of being invited to be one of the advisors of Jurassic
It was weird when they invited me. I thought it was a joke. I got an email from the director, literally just an email from the director, from his Gmail account too, by the way, and Colin Trevorrow. He's an incredible filmmaker, and so I thought it was fake, but we followed up on it, and it's like, okay, this is real, and so I was just honored. I thought it was amazing. I was so happy. And I'm just so pleased that I'm able to use my knowledge of dinosaurs, in a way that can reach a lot of people, because there's no better way to reach millions of people around the world than a blockbuster movie. So, guys, and with that, I'm sorry I'm going to have to go because it's coming to the top of the hour and I have a lab meeting with my students. So it was a real pleasure. If anybody else has questions that you wanted to ask and didn't get a chance, just feel free to. My email is pretty easy to find, so just send me off a message. But otherwise, really great to meet you guys. Great to see a good Brazilian contingent. Obrigado to you guys. And, good luck. Good luck with all your studies, wherever life takes all of you. Just follow your passions and work hard and stay curious. So maybe see some of you in Edinburgh then in the future.
Right. Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody. Yep. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brusatte.
Yep. My pleasure. Bye.
Well, everyone, thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed our lecture today. And also don't forget that we have also 2 other lectures during the day. So I hope to see you all there. But that was it. Thanks again. It was a pleasure. And yeah.
It was amazing. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you, Laura.
Bye, guys. Thanks for coming.